There's a lot of grief that I've lived through after losing my parents, but then now more recently my brother. And so it's just been, just ripping my heart out. And if I'm being honest, like, the Sideline Shimmy is supposed to be joyful, but there are still times where like I'm struggling to find my own joy. And I think that's something we need to talk about as well, because I think that people just assume that like, oh, I'm married and I have kids and I have everything that I've ever dreamed of. I'm not allowed to be sad. And it's like, wait a sec. Yes, you are. Yes, you are allowed to be sad,
Yes. Welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I'm your host, grief and soul purpose coach and fellow griever, Tara Accardo. Lauren, welcome to the Life with Grief podcast. I have been looking forward to chatting with you for the longest time. We got connected through this wonderful community of fellow grievers and people in grief work as well. And I'm just so thankful to know you, but I'm really excited for you to share your story here with everyone today and how far you've come. I mean, some of the loss that you have endured, I think, unfortunately, many people listening to this podcast can empathize with one way or another. And yeah, so I'm really just excited to have you, share your story, get into, as I was saying before we just jumped on and officially started recording, your message and what you stand for and everything. It's so inspiring. It is something that people need to hear today. So anyway, enough of my rambling. I'm just so excited to have you.
No, I love it. What a great introduction. And I know we've been trying to plan this out for a little while now.
But what?
Yeah, thanks to our dear friend, Mrs. Sanchez. She's so amazing. And I'm just so grateful for the connections that have brought so many people together through grief, right? Because it is something that people are a lot of times afraid to talk about.
Absolutely.
And in many ways it's become stigmatized. And I think the biggest reason for that is because people don't want to talk about struggle, right? Like, with struggle, there's shame. Right. And with shame, we put that in a corner. We don't want to talk about it. And obviously with grief, there is struggle. Yep. And it's not a linear path, right? You may wake up one day feeling on top of the world after you've been grieving something, and wake up the next day like it feels like you have a ton of bricks sitting on your chest. And so it's not an easy journey, but I think it's great that we have platforms like this to talk about. And so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, we're just normalizing it, right? Again, like taking some of the stigma out of it, just like you said. So I definitely want to get to your journey with all of this. But first, I love to start off with having guests just tell us like a little bit about themselves. So any fun facts about you, things people may or may not know if they were to just...
I don't know. We just talk about myself. No, I love that. Well, obviously, I say obviously, but I am a sideline reporter for ESPN. And so I've actually been on this journey of sports reporting I've actually worked for ESPN for almost a decade, which is really crazy to me. And so it's really been a fun journey being in the sports world, being a female in a male dominated industry, and really just kind of taking the reins and putting my head down and just working and going after it. And so, that's kind of a fun fact. And then people always love to talk about the Sideline Shimmy. So it actually is something that was born out of nervousness. And so, it's crazy because, we talk about different things like the, grief and working through things. There's a such thing as like a grounding exercise.
Yes.
And I'll be honest with you, like I was 1000% like not into that. Like that's like voodoo magic. Like breathing and all the things like, But then I realized like, whoa, like there is something to this. And my therapist helped me work through that. And I actually figured out real quick that like the Sideline Shimmy was truly a grounding exercise, and still is for me, because when I get nervous, y'all, and I still get nervous when I go out there on TV, because it's like the adrenaline, the energy's up, everyone's fired up, the stadium, it's loud, everybody's going crazy. And all of a sudden my heart just starts palpitating, and I'm like, it's okay, it's time to perform. It's like when I was a gymnast, just going out there and performing. And so it really has just become a cool grounding exercise. So it's really just a goofy, when the music's playing, I dance on the sidelines, and just kind of became a viral thing. So that's a fun little sidebar, I guess, that people always like to talk about.
I love it. Yeah. How can you not call that out? I mean, but I've seen reels and TikToks on it.
I've had people be like, it's funny because it like along the way, people are like, where do I know you from? Usually I don't ever give anything away. Yeah. I'm always like, oh, where do I know you from? And then they'll start kind of guessing things. And then it just kind of comes up and they're like, oh, you're that girl that dances on the sidelines. And it's so funny that that's like became like, I've been known for that, you know?
That's
So, I mean, I don't
amazing.
know, good, bad, or indifferent. Who knows?
Oh,
Some people
good. It's so
I get
good. I
so
love it. I
crazy.
love
So,
that that's actually kind of rooted in grounding though. Like, I mean, again,
yes, there's like therapy in it.
yes.
People will look at that and be like, what an idiot. Or, you know, some people are like, oh, she just likes to grab attention. And it's like, no, really, like really and truly, this all started with helping me to just get grounded in what I'm doing and you know, relieve some of that anxious and nervousness.
Sure.
And then now, you know, it's just, it really has turned into a way to find joy because I'll be
Mhm.
honest with you, like life has been hard and there have been seasons of grief you know, I know we're going to get into my story,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of grief that I've lived through after losing my parents,
Mhm.
but then now more recently my brother. And so it's just been, you know, just ripping my heart out. And
Yeah.
I actually just sent out a newsletter regarding this. Is like, I mean, if I'm being honest, like, you know, the sideline shimmy is supposed to be joyful, but there are still times where like I'm struggling to find my own joy.
Mm.
And I think that's something we need to talk about as well, because I think that people just assume that like, oh, you know, I'm married and I have kids and I have everything that I've ever dreamed of.
Mhm.
I'm not allowed to be sad. And it's like, wait a sec. Yes, you are. Yes, you are
Right.
allowed to be sad, you know?
Yes. Oh my god, thank
So,
okay, I wanna get into your story, but I just wanna first say thank you so much for saying that because I have definitely had not a lot of people, but I've had some people more so closer to, like, my parents or their friends or something, be like, "Just be grateful for what you have, just focus on your husband and daughter, like, just be happy. Why can't you just be happy?" Because I'm openly talking about grief. Who said I wasn't happy? Like, and again, and social media and all the things, that's a whole separate conversation. But, I think it's very misleading, right? And we have to remind ourselves that it's what people choose to show. And some people share very openly, but we're not sharing every single minute of every single day on there. So, very important reminder, I think.
and I think that as someone like yourself who has a voice in all of this, and has found a voice in a platform, you know, there are common themes that you lean into. There's common
Mhm.
themes that I lean into. Yes, and for me, it is loss and addiction and recovery and
Yeah.
prevention and education and all those things. You know, and as you mentioned, we are so quick to show the highlight reel,
Mhm.
but it's so important to remember at the core of who we are, there is hard, there is tough, there is sad, because with joy there's also sadness, right?
Yeah.
And with you know, struggle there's also triumph, right? There's
Mhm.
overcoming. And I think that we have to, you know, acknowledge the and both,
I
not
was
just the either
just
or.
about to say that, yeah, and the duality and the fact that they can coexist, and so that all being said, I think you're
And
beautiful.
they do
Yes,
coexist. I
they
don't care
do.
what you think, but they coexist. So all of you out there that are trying to you know, debunk the theory,
Yes.
uh, here we
It's like,
are. And
"Sorry,
that's why we're
we're
talking about
not."
it, right? That's why we're having this conversation.
Literally, verbatim, yes. So, that all being said, let's get into your story, your journey of grief and loss, whatever you're comfortable sharing, but again, I know we were talking prior, and I just feel such a kinship to you because, as many people here listening probably know, I have lost both of my parents as well, but, no matter when or how you lose them, and I think we've, have our own different journeys with that. Like, I think that's the beautiful bonding agent, if you will, of grief is that we don't have to have the exact same stories to understand just the core of the weight of that and what that feels
Yeah.
like and losing them at a very pivotal time as you did. So I would love to hand it off to you to again, just share your journey and then
Yeah.
eventually your brother as well, again, whatever you're comfortable talking about. But
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Well, and first off, you know, I know that's something that a connection that we share and something that you and I have talked about in our journeys as we were preparing for this. And you know, it is challenging because you think about like you talk about the pivotal moments, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, first and foremost, you know, my condolences to you. And I know sometimes it sounds weird when people say that because once again, in my mind, when people say, "Oh, my condolences," and I'm like, well, it happened 22 years ago,
Mhm.
but it's still heavy
Yeah.
and it's still valid and it still means something. And I think that is where I've started to shift things around.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I think that one thing I've started to learn is, when people talk about loss, because yes, your story is different and people love to make comparisons,
Oh
right?
God, yeah.
And I love that. I love it. I love the way you preface this because I want everybody, as I share this story,
Mhm.
to know, full disclosure up front, like this is not, oh gosh, she went through that. Like my issues are not nearly as bad because
Right.
no, what you've walked through, Taryn, whatever, what you've walked through in this life is your experience, your loss. It's significant. I don't care if you've had to bury a hamster in a shoebox or walk through, tragic circumstances with loss wherever.
Yeah.
It is all significant
Yeah.
and that's your lived experience. And so I just want to pull back the comparison. And I think the way you shared that, because again, everybody walks a different journey and has a different
Mhm.
story. That's what makes us unique. But
Yeah.
also that connection is the one thing that brings us together.
Yeah.
And there is connection in hard places. And I think that's what the beauty in all this is. So, just kind of talking about that journey for me, you talk about the formidable years.
Mhm.
I was 18 when I got the phone call. I was sitting at Rutgers. I was actually sleeping, and Rutgers, that was like the dream, right?
My
So
dad went to
you mentioned
Rutgers, by the way. That was, like, one of his he went to school,
what?
yes, my dad went to Rutgers. When I saw that, I was like, "Girl, we got that kinda," he loved it.
Oh
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
my gosh,
yeah.
no
So I
way.
have
And that's crazy because a lot of people don't, it's funny because I mean, Rutgers is a great
yeah.
institution, but when I find those people, and especially I live in Alabama, so like anytime I wave the Rutgers
Yeah,
flag,
they're
people
like
are like, Rutgers? Like, how did you end up like here? I said, like, let me tell you. So I love that your dad went to Rutgers.
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Oh, that's awesome. What a cool connection.
Mhm.
Yeah, and obviously it's funny because Rutgers really was never on my radar, but I wanted I wanted a college scholarship in gymnastics. Like that was the dream.
Mhm.
And then but the other dream was being a sports doctor. So this whole like sports broadcasting thing, we'll get to that in a minute,
Deep
but
for
like how
you.
I ended up here is just like, that would the journey was never scripted this way, okay? And
Okay.
I'm sure you can relate to that, right?
Yes.
Because we all have this idea of what our journey is supposed to look like. We have it all mapped out and scripted out in our heads, like that beautiful, everything is supposed to be in alignment.
Mhm.
You're going to have that beautiful wedding day. You're going to walk down the aisle and all the things. Oh, by the way, then COVID happens. Like it's just
Right.
nothing goes as planned. And that's when you just have to lay your arms down and just say, you know what? I'm going to trust in my faith and just know that like I'm going where I'm meant to go.
Yep.
And it might not be my plan, but the good Lord above has a plan, and whatever your beliefs are along that spectrum, like someone's got a plan for you. And for me, I know that it's all kind of mapped out, but we have to be able to kind of step back sometimes and just let go. And so
Yes.
for me, I've got this dream. I'm doing this college scholarship thing. Rutgers was not my first choice, but then it became the only choice. And I'm so grateful for that now, looking back. What a wonderful journey. But I'm in my dorm room studying for exams, get a phone call from my dad to let me know that my mom died. And it came as a complete shock because I had just talked to my parents, like about 8 o'clock that night, talked to my mom, talked to my dad. Nothing seemed out of character. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. So I hung up the phone thinking everything's just fine.
Mhm.
And then I wake up in the middle of the night. He calls me to let me know my mom died. And of course, complete shock. I'm 18 years old. Get on the next plane you can, is what he told me, and I'll be at the airport to pick you up. And unfortunately, he never did show up that day. And instead, it was my cousin and my uncle there to tell me that my mom too had passed away. And so it was just like, what? Like this gut punch because, I was incredibly close with my parents. I mean,
Mhm.
these are two people that until the day I left for college would tuck me in at night. We would say our prayers. They would always
Yeah.
just encourage me through hard work, faith, and determination. You're going to go places.
Oh.
Like until the day I left for college, right?
Yeah.
Set sail. And now I'm having to figure out how I'm going to live life without my two best friends, the two people that I love more than anything in this world. And it just was like, what?
What
And then on top of that, I'm 18. Okay.
so young, Lauren. Oh my god.
Yeah. I mean, 18, didn't have $50 in my bank account. Couldn't,
Mm.
like, how am I going to get a plane ticket home? I had to use my roommate's emergency credit card,
Oh.
scramble the jets, get home, and then find out the news. And I mean, it's just an absolute whirlwind. And I take myself back to that moment sitting in the backseat of that car when my cousin and uncle came and got me at the airport when my uncle delivered the news. And when I take myself back to that little girl really
Yeah.
sitting in that back seat just thinking like, and to think, wow, like,
My God.
how did I get here?
Yeah.
And I sometimes just have to, like, shake myself, like, how in the world did I get here? How did I go from sitting in the backseat of that car getting the absolute worst news of my life to being able to sit here having this conversation with you
Right.
in a way that is open, honest, and vulnerable, and honestly, while it comes with a lot of sadness
Mhm.
and I don't wanna say regret, but obviously there's that, and I know you can probably relate to this, the what ifs,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
what if they were still here? What if I still had them in my life? What if, my dad was supposed to walk me down the aisle
Mhm.
and, I now have a 2-year-old son and they
Mm.
they are the grandparents and,
Yep.
they're not here to take on that role
Oh,
and
I
my
feel
my
that.
son will never know my parents, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so there's just so many what ifs and it sucks. Like, I'm just gonna call it what it is.
Yeah.
It sucks because when I take my mind there and I don't try to avoid it because we can oftentimes try to avoid those thoughts, but what I try to do is take in that moment. And here's
Mhm.
like a good example of that, and this actually just happened last week. So my mom was 45, my dad was
Oh, so
52.
young.
So I believe I believe my mom, which is crazy because looking back at the time, I'm 40 years old. Like I'm 5 years removed from how old my mom was.
God.
I'm almost 41 next month.
Oh my God.
And I think like
Yeah.
45 is so young, 52 is so
Yeah.
young.
Yeah.
And so it's crazy because you can get caught up in the sadness of the what ifs.
Mhm.
But even like last week, I had a speaking event out in Colorado and I treated myself to a little spa day.
As you should.
And thank you, thank you. So I walk into the little like, the little sitting room that, like the relaxation room,
Yeah.
and they had this fireplace on. It was so
Oh,
warm and cozy. I was like, oh, and I'm in my little robe, and nobody's in there. And there's a really soft, cozy chair identical to the other side that the fireplace, and I'm staring at it. And all of a sudden, I thought to myself, I said, I'm going to bring my mom into this moment. Like, what this moment would be like
mhm.
if I got to have a special spa day with my mom.
Oh,
And, it's just like,
that's so special.
I just sat in that moment and I said, I'm not sad about it.
Mhm.
I just smiled and was just like, hey mom, and just
Yeah.
took a moment to like acknowledge her.
Mhm.
And so, I tried to instead of and I'm allowed to be sad about it.
Mhm.
And you're allowed to be sad about it for sure.
Yeah.
But acknowledging that and then being able to get to the other side of like,
Mhm.
oh, I'm just going to take in this moment of just a special time, that
Yeah.
while I might not get to enjoy these moments in my life, I have a lot of wonderful people in my life that I do, and I specifically my auntie Linda who poked her head in the room
Mhm.
just a minute ago.
So cute.
Those are the people that I do get to share those moments with. So
Yeah.
it's not so much dwelling on the people I don't get to share the moments with, like
Mhm.
my mom and dad, and recognizing that it can be both. Like,
Yes.
yeah, it stinks really bad they're not here,
Mhm.
but also I'm so blessed and fortunate that I've got, a family and a son that's, just brings so much joy to our lives, a husband that loves me through thick and thin,
Yeah.
and here we are.
That's so beautiful. Oh my God. That's such a wonderful example of because I think people are sometimes like, oh, just don't throw gratitude at me. Like, there's so much around like gratitude practices and just again that just be grateful, right? And I feel like that's something we need to come to on our own terms in our own time. I certainly did. It was nothing anyone could force on me, but again, that's just a wonderful example of, time is I'm not gonna say it heals all wounds, but it certainly it's a factor, right? But it's definitely the work and the intention that we put into the time, from when our loved one dies to where we are now that truly matters. But I just wanna call that out because I think that's just such a heartwarming example of it's just bittersweet kind of, It's just like
Yeah.
it's a wonderful example of that right? Like, I can be so
Yes.
grateful that I am in this beautiful spa near this wonderful warm fire and so cozy and whatever, but also 22 years later can still just hold space for yourself for a minute for that sadness that your mom, for example, is not there to witness that and be in that moment with you, which I love to believe that they are and that they're around in whatever
Oh, yeah.
spiritual realm they're in. I know everyone has different beliefs on that, but I love that story because I do the same thing, and I do it sometimes with both of my parents, sometimes with just one or the other, depending on the moment. Sometimes I do talk out loud to myself and I sound absolutely crazy, and I don't care, it depends on where I do it, but it's just
Heck yeah.
bringing them into those moments and making them feel like they existed still. It's like we know that, but I think that's also kind of the scary part. I don't know if you can empathize with this, but like when enough time goes by, and my parents died about 5 years ago, but regardless, you get to a point where enough time goes by and you're just like, "Oh my god, I feel like I'm not forgetting them, but like certain mannerisms or certain things they would say, we question like, would they actually say that?" Or, because I'll sometimes have people ask like, "Oh, what do you think your mom or dad would say in this situation?" I'm like, I think I know, but is that just me talking? Is that I don't
Yeah.
know, and it's a little scary sometimes when we get to that point, but, however we can
Well, and because we're
survive.
we're aging, right? We're
Yeah,
aging in that same sense. When
yeah,
I picture my mom and dad, I'm still honestly, I think, you talk about formidable years. I would say like that age range from like 8 to 12 somehow. And it's funny because, as I'm writing my book, I'm really pulling a timeline out for a lot of
yeah,
things. Like 10 years old was like the peak pinnacle for me,
yeah,
apparently, because it's like everything happened at 10. And it's just like my memories always go back to that. And it's interesting because I try to be as accurate as I can to figure out like those timelines.
mhm,
But to your point, it's amazing how your brain can also start working in overdrive, and it's starting to like, well, did I actually say that, or did I think I said that, or is
right.
that something I was thinking but it never came out of my mouth? Like, you start like,
What is real?
manifesting those things, but then also those broken dreams, right? The things you dreamed of that you wish could have
Mhm,
happened and
yeah,
wish could have been, those things start to creep in as well. And
mhm,
the further you get away, removed from that timeline of when the event happened, things start to shift and change. And I think
mhm,
that's just part of growing and aging and maturing. But for me, my mind, when I think about my parents, like if I were to envision them walking through this door right now, would be, the way they were when I was a young teenager. I
yeah,
can't envision them aged at all. Like
yeah,
I can't imagine what they would look like at all,
right,
as aged
me
parents
too.
and now grandparents. It's like,
I
what?
know. I almost don't want to either. I'm just like, "You know what? I want you happy and vibrant and whatever." Like,
Yeah.
I picture them, like, really before either of them got sick and just, like I understand what you're saying. There's, like, a certain period of time, might be, like, when I was, like, slightly older, like, my early 20s, but, like, really before both of them were sick and, cancer had kinda taken over or they started going through chemo or radiation or whatever it was, like, just healthy and thriving and, I'm
Yeah.
like, "Okay, that's where I wanna live."
But you know what? I
But
think there's a gift in that too. And I'll say this, and for me and my personal beliefs, I believe God stands in the gap for me in this sense.
Mhm,
And I will say this. So my fear,
mhm,
kind of what you're talking about, is seeing them as the broken,
mhm.
hurting, literally stroking $10 checks to the power company, wondering how they're going to put food on the table for their family.
Yeah.
I think about that now as someone that has responsibility, because
Yeah.
back then I am naive as naive can be.
Mhm.
Well, we've got it all together. We were the white picket fence family on the outside, right?
Yeah.
So I just know now, being an adult and having walked through challenges and, wondering like, am I going to make enough money this month to like, pay my rent, all that stuff.
Yep.
But my fear was always, because when I saw my parents in their caskets, and I'm not even sure we've addressed how they died. So I guess we need to get to that as well. We've just been going,
Yeah,
girl.
I know, I told
Uh,
you.
you know, so both of my parents, and I'll address this now just because I know we're kind of on this topic.
Mhm.
Both of my parents actually died of fentanyl overdoses.
Oh, God.
And so it comes as a complete shock, right?
Mhm.
As I'm sitting in the backseat of that car, we go back to that moment. Well, what happened, right? What
Yeah.
happened? And it would be a very long time, months before the autopsy reports would come out to actually give us the physical evidence of what
Wow.
happened.
Okay.
But in my brain, it was like, no. My parents aren't addicts. No, no, no,
Mhm.
no. That can't be possible. So I just literally ignored those, would not read the toxicology reports, would not look at anything, ignored everything. And so I went years without acknowledging the truth, the shame. But what I do remember at the time is that when I walked into that funeral home and my parents' caskets were open, I remember walking in there and just seeing two people, because I'd seen them in February, they died in March. And again, everything seemed normal when I'd seen them. But I look inside those caskets and I see two people that are just like completely broken and sad.
Oh,
And I mean, let's be real, that's probably what death looks like. It's not real easy to make someone, look happy.
yeah.
But my fear was that was going to be my lasting vision of them.
Yeah.
And so I think that in what I'm hearing from you as you're talking about and reflecting on your parents and their memory, the beauty that comes with, and maybe this will give peace to maybe some of those that are in the early stages of grief.
Mhm.
I can walk into that room in the funeral home. I can see the caskets at the front of the room. I cannot see them anymore. I cannot see their
Mm.
faces. I cannot see what they actually look like. It's a complete blur.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that is what time and healing and hope give us, and knowing that the hurt's always going to be
Yeah.
there. But I think there's a gift in your ability to be able to remember your parents not as they were ill
Yeah.
and becoming a shell of themselves,
Mhm.
but as the young, thriving, vibrant people they were. And I think that can be the case for everybody.
Mhm.
Because, for instance, we think about addiction specifically,
Yeah.
and I'm speaking to this just because this was obviously what happened with my parents. While outwardly, like, they weren't giving off a ton of signs that they were addicted, which is why it came as a complete
Wow.
shock
So
to
you
all of
had
us.
no idea. Oh my
No.
God, that's wild.
Like, knew they were going to a doctor, knew there was like always a lot of prescriptions in the house.
Okay.
They were always sucking
Wow.
on these fentanyl suckers, which were for breakthrough pain.
Oh,
But like I had no idea like
Lord.
they were abusing it. Because to me, you did cross that threshold of, oh, I'm doing everything I'm told, to now in theory I'm like breaking the law, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm taking more than I'm supposed to. Because then that's when it becomes a problem. But my
Mhm.
parents obviously had a problem because they then became so reliant on that medication. It's like they crossed that threshold.
Right. Oh my gosh.
I mean, you just think about it. It's crazy. So I think about addiction as specifically, right? Because here's something unique, right? Because addiction, some people struggle to see it as a disease. They think it's a choice.
Yes. Oh God. Yeah.
Um, Choices can factor in. But I'll say this, just like cancer, other illnesses, diabetes, whatever it is, choices can also factor in.
Yeah.
Like you can eat yourself to diabetes,
Yeah.
let's be real. You know, and that's not always the case, right? Some people are predisposed to it,
Yeah.
just like addiction. People are predisposed to it,
Mhm.
and there are choices. But a lot of times when we go down a certain pathway, whether it's a choice or, for my parents specifically, my dad struggled with alcoholism, but when they started going to this pain management doctor, they were given the prescription to say, hey, this is going to fix your pain. It did what it was
Mhm.
supposed to. This feels good. I can function. I can go to work. I can, live this life, and I can do what I need to do to survive. Well, now imagine a life without that.
Yeah.
You can't. And
Right.
so now you're already down this
That's so
pathway.
good. I just wanna yeah.
Yeah. The pathway of least resistance at this point. And so
Right.
now you've already stepped, you're 10 steps down that road, and it's hard to come back. But what happens, and maybe this is encouraging for some of your listeners,
Mhm.
because with addiction specifically, there are oftentimes, the thoughts of like, well, it was a choice, or, they chose alcohol or drugs over
Yeah.
me, or the character flaws that happen, right? The stealing, the cheating, the lying, the money, all the things that can come with it, because it becomes such a necessity, just like food,
Mhm.
shelter, that you have to have that drug, right? So what ends up happening in some cases, and I see this after talking to people, is there's a reluctance sometimes for forgiveness, and
Mhm.
maybe an anger associated, right? Because
100%.
there's thought of like, wow, like this person chose this path.
Mhm.
but it's so much broader than that,
Yeah.
and it's so much more complicated than that. And what I want to encourage people, just as I found my way in this journey, yes, there were times where I was angry. Why me? Why my family? Why didn't they tell anybody? Why did they let this happen? Why did they just give up, right?
Yeah.
Like, why did they just give up and like not keep fighting? I have such a strong place in my heart of just absolute pure love for my parents
Mm.
that I didn't even know was even possible to have in their absence,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, how can you love someone so much even in their absence, right? Because you talked about some of those memories, they start to fleet, and you're thinking, like, oh my gosh, I never want to lose that.
Mhm.
But that's what I would encourage people that maybe have a different situation. Maybe they've lost loved ones, and maybe they were in situations that created a lot of unrest in their household. Maybe
Yeah.
there were challenges, maybe there was abuse, maybe there's a whole slew of
Yeah.
things, or seeing someone walk down that road of addiction and thinking like, how am I ever, and losing someone to that, how am I ever going to see them as the happy person they were, or the good person they were,
Yeah.
because all I can think about is how bad they were. They went down that road.
Mhm.
That's just, or seeing them in their worst moments.
Right.
But I do believe with time and, just finding that inner peace, we can get to a place where we love that person.
Yeah.
If forgiveness is needed, we forgive that person, and we see them at their best and
Mhm.
no longer at their worst.
Yes. Oh my God, Lauren, you just said so many
I know. I just unpacked a lot.
powerful things there. Oh my God, that was just like coming through you. I love it. I love all of that. And I think that is such a beautiful reminder. And I think, oh God, there's so much I want to say here. But basically, what I will just say is I think, first of all, thank you for saying that because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. Or I see this a lot with people who do seem to right like make certain choices or whatever. It's very easy to see it as sort of just like surface level what happened, feel resentment over the fact that they did or didn't do XYZ, right? I've also last year I lost a friend to an overdose as well, and this year had a family member struggling with that. They're better now, thank God. But there's a lot of those thoughts that can go through our mind as sort of the outsider, so to speak, of like, "Ugh, come on, like get your together, and just is there more I could have done? Like, and it's just such there's so many nuances to it, and it is so not black and white. But yeah, forgiveness is definitely a big part of it. Forgiveness for ourselves, forgiveness for them. And that's where I think we as grievers have the power to make a choice and need to make a choice of like how much we want to hold on to this. And I'm not saying we need to like let go of it immediately or completely or whatever, but like, if it is affecting our joy and our will to live and our just our day to day, like I see so many grievers just get stuck there. But I think so much of what you just said is really helpful for people to hear today. And just in terms of taking a step in the right direction to release some of that, what moving forward can start to look like and feel like. And that all being said, that's actually a perfect segue into sort of my next question for you. And I do want to touch on your brother's passing as well. But I'm curious because you were so young when all of this happened, what did moving forward look like for you? How did you cope with these two massive I'll just say deaths, right? These two absences from your life and so back to back. I mean, kind of like I'm not gonna say joke, but I say like my parents kind of died, so to speak, back to back. But yours literally were so at the same time, really. And so I at being that age, I can only begin to imagine the impact. But then, you're losing your two sort of North Stars, right? It's our
Yeah.
parents. That's a huge deal. So, just walk me through that a little bit, like, where did you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, once again, not a linear path and
Yeah.
journey. I will say, it was decided pretty quickly that I was going to go back to Rutgers.
Mhm.
My auntie Linda, my mom's sister, and my uncle were really the two that kind of the voices of reason, right? They
Yeah.
became the North Stars, the guidance,
Aw.
the compass, and that was hard too, right?
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden they're stepping in, doing their very best. I'm very resistant to other voices, other
Yeah.
people telling me what to do,
Me
other
too.
people like, no, I'm going to be a renegade and
Yeah.
not do what you said, right? Like, let's be real, bratty 18-year-old over here. But going back to Rutgers was probably one of the best decisions. And my auntie Linda was like, Lauren, you've got to go back to school,
Mhm.
right? And so going back to that structure that I had at Rutgers, I was on a gymnastics team, I had a commitment, I had a team, and I just had people that loved me.
Mhm.
But I will say this, it wasn't just love, it was also tough love. And I
Mhm.
underscore tough because it got to a point where I was just like wallowing in it, right? Excuse after excuse after excuse. I'm allowed to have excuses, right?
Yeah.
Because, oh, by the way, my parents died. People are going to understand if my grades are slipping and I'm about to flunk out of school. And then it was like, okay, eventually my gymnastics coach was like, all right, Lauren, like it's time to saddle up, you know? And so
Mhm.
it was that tough love. And it was that realization that like, hey, you've got to do something about this. Like we can't direct your life,
Yeah.
right? We can only do so much. We are here to help you and guide you and hold your hand through it. But until you commit to this journey and your willingness to put one foot in front of the other, like you're just gonna be in this and it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where over the course of time I realized like, okay, I've got to make a change. So it was really truly baby steps, right? It was that
Mhm.
encouragement of like, okay, the sports medicine thing is not working out. My grades aren't real good right now. Probably need to make a change.
Mhm.
And then making that shift and then getting a tutor in every class, starting to see a therapist, someone that could help me really
Right.
deal with like the inner emotions, not just the sadness, but also the anger. Like I was
Yeah.
pissed, right? I'm mad. Like, why did this happen to
Rightfully
me?
so.
So I think those were, but again, and I want to underscore and highlight every bit of this as I share this timeline. It's
Mhm.
easy to quickly like bounce to the next thing, but keep in mind, y'all, this was a
I kn
long journey,
Yeah, I wish, like,
very
for the
long
sake of
journey.
time, I know we always have to, like, summarize, but, like,
Yeah.
that's a great reminder to people that, I even say this when I tell my own story. I'm like, "You don't understand the day-to-day struggles and the day-to-day
Yeah.
situations that came
Yeah.
up to get me to where I am today." So, yes, good
Yeah. I
good
didn't just wake
disclaimer.
up like smiling and like, okay, we're going
So
to go
7
attack
years
life here.
later, I was fine. No, it's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of work that goes
Yeah.
into that. Yeah, and it sounds like you had a lot of
And
great
work.
support and help along the way
Yeah.
too, but so much of that was in your hands, and so I just wanna, like, highlight that message because I feel like so often and thank you for just mentioning that, I made excuses and things too because listen, when we are grieving and we're in the thick of it, sure, that's easy to do
Pity
and sometimes it's
party.
valid. Oh, yeah,
Woo!
and it's not a fun one either, but
No.
it's one that we throw for ourselves, rightfully so. But I feel like I know there's no, like, timeline on it, but I think we do eventually kind of do naturally get to a point and have to get to a point where we can either continue in the wallowing and sitting in that and making that our whole personality, or we can make different choices. And it
Mhm.
sounds like some of the choices that you made in a positive way have helped shift that for you.
Yeah, and like I said, it has been a journey, but work, and I wanna underscore
Yes.
that. You said the work that you've done because, my friends, it takes work.
Mhm.
So, it's that stepping stone of like, okay, now I'm committed to doing something different, to like pack my bags and get out of this mess,
Yeah.
right? This pity party that I've thrown for myself with all the, wet, yucky confetti sitting on the floor and just
Not
the,
cute.
not cute, you
Party
know,
hats and
um, kazoo sitting out of my mouth that's not working anymore and the party hat that's just crumpled up,
yeah.
like let's just call it the epic walk of shame, right? Like, that's what we're gonna call this thing.
Yeah.
The epic walk of shame
Oh
of
my
like,
god.
"Oh, okay, we need to do something about this,"
Yeah.
right? But work is the key
Mhm.
because I do think that when we shift our mindset and say we're gonna do something a little different
Yeah.
here, it's easy for us to kinda, like, go out of this thing of like, "Okay, well, now I'm committed, so, like, things should start changing right on their own." Oh, no.
Mhm.
Like, it requires work, and I actually equate this too because it's much of the same. Now, full disclosure, I don't drink, I don't do drugs, and haven't that's never been even an issue for me. So, I have not struggled with substance use disorder
Mhm.
like my parents did. However, I will say, as I've studied this, leaned into education, done a lot of mentoring with those that have, and had other family members that have struggled. I will say this, that you know, in the world of addiction, it takes a lot of work. So it's not just let me just quit taking the substance.
Oh, yeah.
It now requires a whole reckoning with your entire
Yep.
life, and it's a day-to-day battle.
Yep.
And it's much of the same when you're walking through grief and you want to find the joy in life again.
Mhm.
You have to really come to a reckoning and say, okay, it's not going to be linear. It's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, but I'm going to keep swinging, right?
Mhm.
I'm going to keep swinging even when things get hard. And when you put in that work, you come to the other side. And let's put it this way. It is a work in progress because the work is always being done,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think that is a friendly reminder to all that,
Yeah.
you know,
And I hope that
you're
takes
going to
some
get,
pressure off too. I've said something kind of similar on the
yeah,
podcast before too. And yeah, it's like this term work and like for a lot of us grievers are like, "Ugh, I don't want to work. I just want to feel better."
no,
I
I
get
know. It's
that.
like, no.
But it's not work in like the traditional I mean, yeah, some of it is going to be tough to get up and do every day depending on where you are in your grieving experience, but there's so much growth and magic and self like reckoning, you use that word, I kind of liked that, like that we can have with ourself in this and the things that we can unlock and discover and realize and start to understand about life and relationships and how it all works, like it just keeps coming. And it's really the most beautiful process if we allow ourselves to open up to it. And so we do have to go into it with, knowing like, okay, this is not going to be easy, but I am committed because I'm not gonna live like this. I'm not gonna live in this low vibrational frequency. Like I'm done. I'm tired of it. And I want better for myself. And it's like, okay, where
Mhm.
do
Because
let me
that's
just take a step.
exhausting too. Living
Yes.
in that low
Oh God,
frequency
yeah.
is very
It's
exhausting,
I
just so
would
you
argue
know.
to say it's harder, it's worse than
Yeah.
doing the work to, like, get ourselves up
Yeah.
there a little bit, when we're again,
Yeah.
if and anyone here listening
Agree.
who's in, like, those very early days, just, like, table this for later because I understand this might be, like, a little like, "Oh my god, Tara, I'm not even there yet," so that's fair, but
Yeah.
something to keep in
Yeah.
mind.
Pump the brakes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm like, "I get it, we're talking to a lot of people here." But, okay, so I would love to get to your brother and just touch on that part of your journey, and the reason I wanted to ask, like, how you coped with all of that after your parents and now losing your brother later on, years later, has that changed for you? Like, the way that you have coped? Like, what does that experience look like? So, just again, whatever you're comfortable sharing in terms of his death, but then what this sort of, for lack of a better term, newer loss has looked like for you.
Yeah, I mean it's crazy because if I'm being fully transparent and honest, when my brother passed away, and this happened a year ago, November 8th,
Mm.
so we're
Oh,
coming up on a
that's
year,
recent. I would
very
yeah.
recent. Yeah. And
I'm so
unfortunately, it
sorry.
was one of those deals. I was on the road. I feel like I'm always as far away as I possibly can be. So once again, middle of the night, get the phone call just like I did with my
Oh
mom when
god.
my dad called. Got to get on a plane, got to get home, and it's like I feel like I'm on an island, right? Nobody's there to support me, nobody's there to just let me fall apart on, right? And I'm like, I just got to get home. I mean, it was just devastating. And so with that, I will say this. So my brother, it was unexpected. He was dealing with some health issues, that were tied to, some of the things that he had struggled with, with alcohol, and really just long term. I think, and I'm still unpacking this. And I'll say this: my therapist says, don't put a microphone to something you're still processing. So,
Fair.
I'm still unpacking all the things right
Yeah.
now. But, I know that my brother, like me, had his own set of struggles.
Mhm.
He was in the military, just as charismatic as they come, like, and loved our country, loved fighting for our country. Did 3 deployments: Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and really just was a bold soul, was a courageous soul, and
No
also
kidding.
an adventurous soul. Like I say this because when people ask now, when someone mentions like, oh, I lost someone, I've learned to kind of say, well, what is it? What's something special about them? And
Mhm.
and I love to be able to touch on that, and I love to be able to give people an opportunity to say, what was special about the loved one that they might have
Yeah.
lost. And for my brother, that came up recently, as someone asked me that question. I said, this dude, like, if it didn't have risk attached to it, he didn't
Not
care. Like,
interested.
I ain't touching it. And so that's just his personality. And,
Wow.
I think about that often when I think about my brother and just what he stood for. And I think about our journey together.
Mhm.
As you mentioned, 22 years ago,
Yeah.
we get this news. He's in Norfolk, Virginia. He's a parachute rigger in the Navy.
Okay.
He's at this point he had not been he had come back from a deployment, so he was on land and thankfully was able to get home pretty quickly. So he and I walked this journey together,
Yeah.
right? So he and I walked a parallel path, but his path certainly looked different than mine, right? So mine was go back to Rutgers and be loved on.
Mhm.
His was strap on the boots and go to war.
Oh gosh.
And so, you know, I felt like, and I still feel like in so many ways, I mean, that's the life that he wanted to live. He signed up for it. He knew what he was getting into, but then also I think that was coping for him,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I'm not slowing down to acknowledge this thing, and we're gonna put the boots on and go to war.
Yeah.
And I'm like, all right. So, I think he and I had different paths in that way.
Mhm.
You also have to consider he's a male, I'm a female. He's also a military. He is a soldier in the sense
Mhm.
that he has been conditioned and wired to operate like a soldier,
Oh, yeah.
mentally and physically, right? And emotionally and all those things. And so I think that there's just a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
And again, I'm still trying to unpack a lot of it, but my brother did struggle, coping, alcohol became his coping mechanism.
Mhm.
And so ultimately, he developed some health issues, that were some related, some indirectly related to that, but still came as a complete shock, right?
Mhm.
And I think my brother was kind of good at like, I was little sis, he didn't
Mhm.
want to burden me or make me worry about what he was dealing with. And a lot of times, I wish I could hold that burden for him, like
Mhm.
what I would give for him to just hand me that burden and just say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And
Yeah.
it's hard, but
Oh.
I think the one thing that has come from this journey is that you kind of ask like, how is it different? And I and in full transparency, as we come back to this, is that like I thought I had this suit of armor.
Mhm.
Like I thought, oh, like I've walked this war. I've been in the trenches with this grief.
Yeah.
When this happens again, I'll be ready. And it's like,
No.
ready for what?
Right.
Loss is loss.
Oh.
And I think that is where, it was really not just a gut punch, but an absolute like drag down fight with myself because I felt like, oh, you should be stronger than this. Like you've been through this, right?
Mhm.
And then when it hits me, I'm just like, no, like
Right.
no. And I'm just in the thick of it, and I will be honest with you. I think right now, as I'm, rounding the corner to the year mark,
Mhm.
I've just kept myself so busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I release a book October 1st. He dies November 8th. And then I literally take 1 week off from ESPN. I'm back on the
Oh
field. I
my
finish football
god.
season. And I'm like diving into like life, right?
Mhm.
Of course, being a mom and a wife, but then also like the speaking events. Like I thought I was ready to be done with it all. I was ready to light it on fire.
Mhm.
I had a bunch of podcasts scheduled. I canceled all those. All of a sudden, the speaking events just started rolling in. People were like, "Oh, we want to book you for this and this," and it was just almost like my heart was calling me to it, even though I was hurting so much inside. I was just like, "All right, I'm going to keep going." And again, I haven't really leaned into his story and that loss as much publicly, as we're unpacking it,
Mhm.
but that's obviously, I've started to share more and really just kind of get involved with different causes that I believe, that were near and dear to his heart, organizations, especially the veteran community that I
Yeah.
feel like, he was very rooted in
Yeah.
his brothers and sisters in arms. And I don't know, like, it's crazy how grief can feel the same yet so different.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't even know if there's a way to explain that. And you probably, in some ways, can explain that with what was the timeline for your parents?
So my mom died
How far apart?
December 2019. My dad was July 2020, so in the height of COVID,
Yeah.
and then I lost my dog
Yeah.
the following year, which was like the sister I never had, I always joke, and yeah, and just random things in between there too, but yeah, I mean, just because I say this all the time, just because you've lost like one person or even two or whatever, they're each their own individual, right? With their own story, their own life. Like we're there maybe some certain coping tools that we've like gathered and can use from the first time or two around, right? But like
Yeah.
the way that we when I lost my friend, as I mentioned, to an overdose or anything that was going on with my family member earlier this year, like, it brought me to my knees a little bit, and I was like, "Oh my god, I guide people through this, I coach people through this." I had a similar thought, like, not so much like I should be doing better or whatever. I wasn't, like, that hard on myself, but I guess I was just, for some reason, surprised that it brought me to my knees as much as I did, and but then looking back on it, I'm like, "Why were you surprised?" Right? These are completely different people, different circumstances, and just because you figured out how to quote, "how to cope with it," the first time, completely different application, the I don't again, the second, third, whatever time around, and people are surprised by that. So I just wanna, like, so thank you for bringing that up because I wanna, like, destigmatize that as well because I think a lot of people feel shame and weight around that they should have it figured out better or it should somehow affect them less, and it's like, what? Like, it's just not realistic.
Yeah, and I sometimes try to go deeper into, like, where did I come up with that notion?
Yeah.
Like, where did that even come
Same.
from, right? Like, loss is loss,
Yeah.
and I mean, my parents are my parents. My brother is my brother. Our relationship, and I'll say this, like there were times in my life with my brother, our relationship was complicated. And a
Mhm.
lot of that was, he's on deployment. He's serving our country. He's away. I'm not seeing him as much.
Right.
I at times was closer with my cousin Justin. He became like a brother to me, my auntie Linda's, youngest son. But we were thick as thieves like growing up, right?
Mhm.
And my brother was closer with his older brother. And so like we all just were like family and we hung out and everything else. But there were times where things were complicated with my brother and
Yeah.
our relationship and our communication might not have been as repetitive or as consistent, I should say,
Mhm.
at certain times, but that's every season of life,
Yeah.
right? And I think here's the other part that I get stuck on, and it can be so hard because you talk about that continuum in some ways too, of like going back to the good, joyful, happy days with your parents.
Mhm.
I get stuck in that continuum too, and it's not just the physical being of it, of like, oh, my parents, they were thriving and happy and whatever.
Mhm.
It's also the emotional piece of that. I get stuck in the continuum of it is so hard for me sometimes to grasp that not only does aging happen,
Mhm.
but like life happens too. And we're all in a different place,
Yeah.
right? I'm now 40 years old. Who I am now is different than what I was 20, 30 years ago.
Right.
And then it's the same with my brother, in a lot of ways, like I started beating myself up thinking like, well, why didn't I spend more time with him? Why did, because when you lose someone, no amount of time is enough,
No,
right?
absolutely.
But then you think about it, it's like I am married with a child. Like I am not in relationship with my brother. Even if I had all the bandwidth in the world, I could still only give him a slice of that pie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it's so easy for us to beat ourselves up. And I get stuck in this like time trap of thinking like, oh, everything is exactly the way it was when we were 10 years old.
Mhm. Mhm.
He was 12, I was 10. And like that is my mind just goes back there. And I think in some ways, I don't know why it is, but it's almost like I think when loss happens, our growth in some ways gets stunted, and I don't know how to like quite articulate and explain
I
that, and
can
maybe
see that.
something I'll dig in with my therapist. But I think that we stop, and I think for my brother a lot of that happened too, is like we it's almost like we take a pause, we take a beat in like the maturity and the growth world, right? Because I think that trauma does something to us, and it maybe slows down or even maybe speeds up certain things in our lives that either allow or hinder us from really fully grasping what it is we're walking through.
Yes.
That's probably a defense mechanism, I'd say, in a lot of ways
I would
too, but
imagine, my completely non-therapist, opinion on this,
yeah.
yes, probably, yeah, I'd imagine, I
But,
mean,
like, grief, like, it's a complex thing, like, it's
very.
very complex here, and I think that the more I talk about it, the more I'm like, "Dang, like, this is." And the non-therapist here too,
Right.
like, don't get me wrong, I have 0 letters behind my name whatsoever,
Yeah,
so
yeah. Yeah, it's just it's something that we will just kind of be unpacking the rest of our life a little bit, and I think the older we get too, you know, you mentioned aging, right? We realize the fragility of life, and there's just so much even if you haven't, like, specifically lost a loved one, right? Like, you just life continues to unfold and surprise us, and we're faced with the realities of some of it, and, you know, especially I certainly won't go down this road, but just, like, things happening just, like, in the world and in our country and stuff lately, it's like, "Oh my god, what is happening here?" You know? And and I've been
yeah,
reflecting on that a lot, like, my young self and how naive and just my I realize, like, how good of a job my parents did at, like, you know they didn't, like, shield me in a bad way, but it's just, you know, made life so magical and happy, and you realize, like, wow, the world is it's so joyful, and it's so beautiful, and it's so incredible, but wow, it's rough sometimes, and
it
it's
is,
very
yeah.
humbling. So in these last like just a few minutes here, I would love to talk about your book because you mentioned your book. I wanted to touch on this because again, just to kind of like start closing out the conversation and really just hammer home your message about again just the resilience, compassion, the importance of checking in on people, right? I think is something you kind of alluded to and like especially with your brother and I really relate to that a lot again, especially with some things that have gone on in my own family and you know, for you, I know like you know, grief is not just it's not just a part of your story. It has truly like shaped the way that you show up in the world and your life and now some of the work that you do. And I think that's so incredible. So I would love for you to just like mention your book and just like any final thoughts that you have for anyone here listening who, you know, maybe wants to maybe wants to be a little more shatterproof to give the book of your the title of your book, but just, you know, what
Yeah.
does that look and
Hey,
feel like
I
for
like it.
you?
Way to segue,
I
girl.
know.
Um,
I know.
yeah, you know, and it's actually interesting because I've gotten asked a lot, like, why Shatterproof? Like, how'd you come up with
Yeah.
that terminology or whatever? And it's interesting because as my publisher and you know, a friend that was also helping with the PR stuff, Gary, we kind of just were like tossing ideas around. Let me tell you, like, writing a book is hard enough, but then like all the stuff that goes with it, like finding a title, like, please, I don't ever wanna do that ever again. It was just so
Yeah.
challenging, but he literally used the analogy of, like, taking this was Gary, he said, like, "It's like someone takes a baseball bat to your laugh like, somebody takes a baseball bat to your life and shatters it into a million pieces,
Mhm.
yet through the human spirit and through resilience, you've proven that you can pick up those pieces that are lying on the floor, gather them, and piece them back together in something beautiful, and it might not look the way that you thought your life was gonna look, but you're able to take that very thing and create a foundation of joy and continue walking this path of life." And I was just like, wow, you know, so that's kind of where this idea of Shatterproof
I
came
love
from.
that.
And you know, people for so long were like, "Oh, you should write a book," and I'm like, I know I'm in the business, I know I'm in the media industry,
Mhm.
but like I'm a conversationalist, like I'm
Mhm.
not a writer, you
Mhm.
know? So when I kind of started pursuing this book thing, I was put in contact with a guy at Highbridge Books, Darren, and we started talking and I started getting that confidence of like, okay, we got some resources. I had a co-writer. He likes to call himself a ghostwriter, but I'm like, stop. Like you were in this. We were like, it was like taking a piece of clay and we just molded this thing
Oh, I
together.
love it.
So shout out to Holland Webb, and I really enjoyed that process. And I'll say this, and I have no shame in saying it because it's funny. Like a lot of authors and stuff don't like to point the fact out that they had a co-writer or a ghostwriter, and I'm like first and foremost, I needed every ounce of first of all assistance, but number two, like I can tell you that if I did not have someone asking me some of the deepest questions that we went into line of questioning, I needed that from
Yeah.
Holland. Somebody that could really forced me to go deep because I thought, oh, I'm vulnerable, I'm open, I'm transparent, right?
Yeah.
But then until all of a sudden you get asked these questions, you're like, whoa,
Right.
I'm just scratching the surface here. And so I think that to me was like really cool to go through that process and recognize like, oh, there's a lot to learn here.
Yeah.
And it's been fun. Like it's been a journey. I'm actually excited about it because we're releasing the paperback. I don't know when this particular episode will air, but we're releasing the paperback. And, so we've got the hardcover, the paperback, and also the audio version in which I
Are
narrate,
you?
which
I
is
was
kind of
gonna ask.
crazy.
I love it.
Yes, I narrate it. So
Yeah.
if you're an audio listener, but it's been a journey and such a healing journey.
Oh,
And I
I
think
bet.
that is one thing, I encourage people like, and I've wrestled with it for a long time. Like, who cares? Who wants to read this book? But if nothing else, like getting my thoughts out there, really doing some deep
Mhm.
work,
There it is again.
that was a lot. That was a lot of work for me.
Yeah.
But it was work that I feel like really in so many ways became therapeutic, and I'm grateful for that. And so, it's been a long journey. And,
Amazing.
keep in mind that, we started that process 19 years after my parents died. And, it took a few years for us to get to the finish line on it. And, I'm just grateful for what it has done for me, my well-being,
Mhm.
and then, how it has touched other people in their lives. And I'm just, I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, probably so cathartic. That's how I feel in these conversations too, right? Like people will
Yeah.
sometimes ask me like, how can you talk about this so much? How can you talk about either your parent or how they died or grief or whatever? Isn't that heavy?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but also look at how many times we've laughed and smiled today. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's like,
Yeah.
so we all, yeah, there are definitely parts of it where we also might cry, right? Because grief
Yeah.
brings up some things. But
And you can do both. And like
yes,
when
look at that.
I hit end and we leave this conversation, I'm going to take a pause, probably go eat a delicious snack, go grab something in the kitchen, decompress
Yeah,
for a moment,
yeah,
and hold space for that too, right?
yes.
Hold space for the moment of like, okay,
Like, "Ooh."
let's whew, deep
Yeah.
breath, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, that's an amazing example of what we should all do every day, just from grief, but also just daily stressors, right? We're all busy. A lot of it's very on the go. People probably listening to this on their commute or on a walk or something right now. So again, just a beautiful reminder to just take a few moments, take those deep breaths, and find what tools work for you, but also don't be fearful of the quote work. That seems to be like the theme of the day.
yeah.
That we need to
Yeah.
put in, but some of it again is so rewarding and so cathartic and worth it.
When you're
Yeah.
willing to put your mind to it and just say, I'm going to do this, even if it's baby steps, one day at a time, one step at a time, climbing that mountain.
Mhm.
Nobody sprints to the top, right? And so
Yeah.
let's give ourselves grace and all of that and say, we're going to get there.
Yeah.
It'll be on a timeline,
Right.
and it will
Matter.
be a timeline that probably will be wild and crazy, but we're going to get there.
Yeah.
And,
And it looks
just
different
buckle
for
up,
all of
baby.
us too. So like we were saying in the beginning, right? Like that's why the comparison game would just throw her out the
Yeah.
window because it just doesn't
Yes.
exist here. Lauren, thank you so much for your time today. This was such an empowering conversation. Really quick, where can
Yay.
everyone find you and connect with you if they want to, follow you or get to know you more?
Yeah, absolutely. At Lauren Sisler everywhere, Facebook, Instagram, all the
Easy.
things, wherever. You'll see a few sideline shimmies on
I love
there.
it.
Football season's here,
Oh
so
yeah,
that's a lot of my feed now.
I'm sure.
It's actually funny that somebody sent me a link that somebody had posted on TikTok that they had taken a video of me sideline shimmying, and they were like, "Hey, we don't have the cheerleaders on this side of our stadium, so we've got this instead." And I was like, "Yes, I'm glad I could be a source of entertainment for
You're like,
folks."
just me alone.
Bringing the joy,
Oh
right?
yes.
So, at Lauren Sisler, would love to hear from you. Also, on my website, there's a form you can fill out if you want to reach out to me. It goes straight to my inbox. So I'd love to connect with you if you have a story or just some feedback on what you heard today, what resonated, what worked, what do you want to know more about? And again, just thank you for this opportunity, y'all. And Tara, thank you for this platform and
So
for doing the great
welcome.
work that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I appreciate your time today. I am sending you a huge thank you for tuning into today's episode, my friend. Visit lossesbecomegains.com for my blog, more coping tools, ways to work with me, and so much more. And be sure you're following along on Instagram and Facebook at Losses Become Gains, and on Instagram and TikTok at Life with Grief Podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and share this episode or this podcast with someone who could use it too. And remember to always keep asking yourself, how will I turn my losses into gains today? I'll catch you in the next episode.